And I can edit the first part, so we're all good. But welcome to the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I am your host, Zach Reed, and we are at my favorite time of year. This is rookie season. This is where all of those hours of film grinding pay off. This traditionally is the dummy rookie bonanza, but circumstances being what they are, 2020 has pared us down. We're pushing on into 2021, and the rookie bonanza has kind of been paired to a rookie square dance. And so bring your partner round and round, do-si-do, and here we go. I have J-Mike with me, and I'm excited to get into some of this rookie class.
My brother, here we are again, 2021. And as you said, the bonanza, the budget for the bonanza isn't quite what it was, but we press on. I'm excited to be able to talk these rookies. I'm excited to be able to get into and continue to grow in our craft and have some solid discussion to be able to help some folks along, give our perspective, and just enjoy our time.
Yeah, it's funny. This class has been talked up for at least 2 years, and in the same breath as the 2020 class. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're seeing something different, but I'm not as high on the 21 class as a lot of people that I've seen around the neighborhood.
And that is going to be, and I don't think you're wrong. I think that we just were spoiled with absolutely star-studded, incredible group in this 2020 class that will give us fantasy goodness and likely fantasy stardom from many more players than even the critics had vaunted before. It was a group that we look up, and all of a sudden we get to the end of the year, and all five of the running backs, sans CEH, because people have somewhat soured to some degree, but everything is looking up roses come 2021 for these guys. Justin Jefferson, our main man, has to top 3, top 5 dynasty wide receiver. We're looking at a group of wide receivers that we still haven't even really got to scratch the surface on. Some of these guys, between Mims not having really any kind of quarterback play, Laviska Shenault having the Texas triangle, if you will, down there in Florida, in Jacksonville, with the quarterbacks that he had to deal with. And there's a lot to be said still, even with a guy like CeeDee Lamb, who we loved a lot, with Dak coming back. So, or hopefully coming back. So there's a lot to be said, a lot to be excited about. And this group isn't that, but I think the question is going to become, how close or will we be chasing the ghost of 2020, the beauty that was? So I'm excited to be able to see exactly what we've got here.
Always. I feel like we're back in 2015, where you were kind of in the wake of that 2014 receiver class, where you had Mike Evans and Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry and just everybody, Sammy Watkins. Like, you had all of these guys come out. And then the next couple of years were kind of, that you're trying to just survive the wake and hoping and grasping at players. And look, this class is nice. I think when we get to the receivers, I'm going to be a little bit more excited about the top end of that group. But we're starting off with running backs, and there are a couple. We're gonna go. What do we decide? DLF ADP right now, or DLF rankings? And oh no, that was my fault.
No, we had decided that we've got the top 5 from DLF and plus one. We decided to have a plus one in tonight's dance. So we'll see if we can get through everyone. And Zach, if you would, I think that you have become quietly, and I know that you would not say this, so I have to make sure that I can say this. you have become a rather trusted source, proponent, if you will, of the film grinders club, the grinders, the midnight oil burners, the folks who are really putting their eyeballs to see what's going on the film. So, without going too terribly deep, just give. I think for anybody who may be new listening, who might be new to the dummies, to our group, just give us a little preview as to maybe even some of the things that you're looking for, just your general process, because I know that people respect a lot of the work that you do, me being chief amongst them, of your celebrators and supporters. So give the folks a sneak preview as to kind of how you go about your business during this time of the year with rookie scouting.
So I'm not a Devi guy, and if you listen to this show, you've heard me say that. So I don't start doing analysis on players until the year that they're ready to come out. And when I start watching my film, I try to shut out everything. I shut out analytics. I try to shut out other tape grinders too, because I want my perception of a player to be as close to being purely my observations as I can get. I don't want any other noise. I don't want anything kind of clouding or coloring. I don't want that rose tint. I don't want somebody telling me that a player is horrible. I want to learn for myself. And when I do this, and I've talked a little bit with the analytics community about process this year, which has been kind of nice. It's been interesting. We've had a little bit of a discourse. It hasn't been as much of a fight between film grinding and analytics. But I was talking with Michael Liu the other day, and he was wondering if anybody went back and watched younger film of any of the incoming players and if they ranked that way. And I said, well, look, my process is I like to start at the beginning of a player's career. I'll watch a couple of games early in a player's career, so freshman or sophomore year. I'll watch a couple of games the year before a player comes out, and then I'll watch 6 or 8 or so games. I like to watch between 8 and 12. I think probably 10 is the sweet spot. But I like to see that progression, which is why I start back with some of their younger film. Because to me, a player getting better is nice to watch. It's great to see that growth, but also for me, it plants the seed in my mind that a player can continue to get better when he gets to the professional level, because we talk about this a lot. The NFL is not a developmental league. The NFL is we're paying you millions of dollars. You need to come out and do the job. But if you have a player who's already understood what it takes to get better, already has the ability to identify weaknesses and then attack those weaknesses, and has shown in college that progression, it gives me a little bit more confidence that they come into the NFL and continue to grow. And so I do that, and then down the road, we'll listen to some other people. There are some really great film watchers, Ray Garvin, and all of the guys over at Dynasty Nerds. And there are also some really great, and this is where obviously you, Jay, Mike, I don't want to short you. You are, no, so you laugh, but you're one of my favorite film analysts, because you see things differently than I do. And that to me is a benefit. I don't need people echoing. I don't need people parroting what I've said. I like when people see things differently, and same thing with watching or listening to the guys who do things analytically. So Peter Howard and Michael Yu and Christopher Bean and I don't know, there are hundreds of Jax Falcone, who's like all of these people who analyze things metrically, give me a different view. It allows me a checkpoint where I can go back and either see things that I missed or figure out where I disagree. And so I think that the big secret to all of this is your eyeballs can't see everything. The numbers don't see everything. And in order to get a full picture, I go back and work together with those two sides as a series of checks and balances to kind of mitigate failure. Although this particular episode is just film work for the two of us.
Yeah, and that is as clear of a picture I think that can be painted in terms of how we go about our business. And as someone who is still learning as we go, even though I've played football my entire life, basically from age, not my entire life. I'm an old man at this point, it feels like, but from age 6 all the way through college, I had the privilege to be able to play college ball. And I like to think that I know the game to some degree, but then it's a whole nother ball game when you're actually scouting and you're trying to see the traits that make people successful moving forward, and to be able to hone that and to be able to some degree be coached by you, to learn from you, and to be challenged by you in some instances has been a real pleasure and a treat for me and the guys that we work with as well over at DFPN. So I'm excited to be able to get into it. And as we said before, we're going off of the top 6 ranked running backs per the good folks over at DLF. So first up, I guess, are you ready to jump into it at this point, Zach?
I'm always ready. And these are not our rankings. These are not my rankings. I am seeing things a little bit differently than the fine folks at DLF. All the respect in the world, but man, I see things a little bit differently.
And we'll get into it. I love it. So let's just start. We'll work our way down from the top of what the folks at DLF have. And then, of course, at the end of the episode, we'll go over how we stack rank these guys. And then, of course, as we move forward throughout the rest of this scouting season, we'll add in the others and start filling in blanks and give our tierings, our rankings, and we'll move from there. So at the very top of the rankings currently is one Mr. Najee Harris, running back out of Alabama. You talk about a brick house. You talk about someone who's had to buy their time. You talk about someone who had to wait their turn behind Damian Harris, behind Josh Jacobs. He showed well as the undercard, if you will, the understudy, the opening act. And finally, the last 2 years, we see a guy who's totaled an absurd amount of touches in the last couple of years, over 460 carries in the last 2 seasons, over 2,600 yards. And a guy, again, the Zach Reed rule over the last 2 seasons, reaching that 20 catch area that we like to see. 27 catches in 2019 and 43 receptions, of course, in this last season where he was the absolute engine for Alabama. So let's start with Najee Harris. Talk to me, Zach. What are you seeing from Najee Harris that has you excited about his prospects?
Roll Tide, baby. Roll Tide. And this is how I started off my write-up of Najee Harris. Says roll Tide, bulldoze Tide, drive Tide over an unsuspecting opponent, back Tide up, drive over them again just to be sure. But you know damn well Najee Harris is carrying the ball for Alabama when they're rolling. And look, he's an all-purpose back, 6'2", 230 pounds. Harris is built to run inside, and you love that. He moves not just with power, but with inertia. Like, he carries defenders until he's met by an equal and opposite force, which is not very often. Like, he's carrying piles, he's carrying people. And even when Harris gets met in the backfield, he doesn't usually give up yards, which is something that I look for in running backs. You know, it sounds simple, but driving forward for positive plays and not hesitating and getting caught is a big deal, especially in the NFL, where you're talking the difference between 2nd and 7 and 2nd and 11. It's a huge range of possibilities. Harris has really great vision. He makes lane adjustments mid-run, which for a big player is really, really nice. It's rare to see. He's even dangerous when he gets to the outside. He's got very deceptive speed. And the other thing that I love about Harris is that he shines as a pass catcher, which again, 6'2", 230, can catch the ball. He can split out wide, which is a great kind of little weapon that you can use, but he's also really good at hitting that chip block and then slipping out for a screen. So there are a lot of things that I really like about Najee Harris.
One of the really interesting things that I see with Najee Harris, and he measures in, he goes to the Senior Bowl. He measures in just a shade under 6'2", I think 227 pounds. So every bit of man that you thought that he was, for the 6'2", 230 that they built him as at Alabama. Something that I find truly special about him is, unlike a lot of the running backs in this class, everything is very deliberate with Najee Harris. There is a grace and there is a patience in terms of how he goes about his business, but there's not this indecisiveness. There's not this dancing. There's not questions when he has the ball. It's like it's a constant state of solving any and every riddle that you can put in front of him. And you talk about first tacklers constantly losing when they come to see him. You talk about contact balance. You talk about the having hands that will not only allow him to have the potential for 3-down workload, but like legitimately be one of the like 4 or 5 guys who you see getting 25 touches in a game because you don't have to take him off the field. And one of the things that I really love with Najee Harris is the stop foot, go foot. And it's something that was coined by Chris Harris when I listened to him years ago. And he talks about stop foot, go foot. And so basically when you have this ability to, when not just the ability to cut, but when you put your foot in the ground to be able to stop your momentum, stop everything that's going on, but then also put your foot in the ground to be able to just giddy up without waiting a beat. And his ability to drive through contact. I mean, I could literally list note upon note upon note upon note and things that he's done that's impressive. And what I think the most impressive thing about Najee Harris is the fact of how much better he became as a running back from 2019 to 2020. His improvement in pretty much all areas was phenomenal to be able to watch in an offense that really became about him as the engine, Devonta Smith being someone that they could obviously rely upon as well. But everything revolved around Najee at that point, at the time in Alabama. And I'm excited to be able to see him move forward. So I think at this point, Zach, we're really excited about Najee Harris. We like what he's got going on. Do you have any major questions or anything that gives you pause revolving around his game or his prospects moving forward?
Well, it's difficult, I think, to pick holes in Najee Harris's game, but there are a few minor blemishes. I don't think there's anything huge, but I think that although his size and speed, that combination is impressive, Harris does go through stretches where he gets taken down by the first tackler. And I don't know if it's just if it's a mental thing or if it's a fatigue thing, but he will have runs in games where, he'll have 4 or 5 or 6 plays where he doesn't quite have it. And so that sort of thing, I don't love. I don't think it's a deal breaker, but that happens. And the biggest negative for me actually stems immediately from Harris's athleticism. And it's that he wants to hurdle everybody. And I hate that. While hurdling makes great highlight reels, getting airborne opens you up to so many negative outcomes, including fumbling and the potential for injury. And so like those things, man, just stop jumping, keep your feet on the ground, plant foot, go foot, don't jump foot. Like let's stop.
And it's like you said, it's really when it
Yeah,
happens, like, wow, look at this large man do crazy things. It's like, bro, that some of this stuff is unnecessary.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So if with Najee Harris, and as I guess we can work toward transitioning out. When you look at past classes, is Najee Harris someone that you feel like measures up well with the group that we saw last year? Is he someone who, when we looked at that top five, could he sniff kind of what that group was about last season? How do you feel about when we look kind of back a little bit with Najee Harris's prospects?
When I first started watching this class, I didn't think Najee Harris was going to be in that group. I watched him last year because I thought he was going to come out with the 2020 class. He was my running back 6 last year. This year, I've seen improvement with the pass catching. I've seen improvement with, like you said, the pace. He runs with pace. So I've seen that sort of thing this year. And look, some people are going to point to the fact that he returned to school and he's older and, they're not going to want to draft him. I think, to me, he probably would have been right in that 3-4 range, that J.K. Dobbins tier for me. I still had Swift, Jonathan Taylor 1, Swift 2, with a bullet. And then I think that to me, Najee Harris is probably somewhere in that 3-4 range with Dobbins. And look, the people are going to be talking about red flags. People are going to be talking about his age. But to me, the only red flag that you need to be concerned about with Najee Harris are the ones that are waving Alabama crimson, man. Like, he's going to be a complete back, and he's going to be one of the only backs in this class that I'm really confident should have a role in the NFL and should have a role on your fantasy team, because he's one of the few players who has potential to get up into that top 5 with rushing and receiving, because you're talking about a back who gets 200 plus carries. You're talking about a back who catches 50 balls, and he could do that.
And a quick personal note for everyone: where Zach and I are in a league where neither one of us earned the draft picks that we're about to discuss, though. So Zach has the 101. I've got the 102. Is any chance 12-team per flex league that you would bypass Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields or anybody else that you dream of? Is there any chance that Najee Harris could be 101 for you in Superflex?
No, not in Superflex. I don't even think it's a question in Superflex that Fields is that Lawrence is the 101, and
Ooh.
I really think that there's Trevor Lawrence 101 and go from there. And honestly, I know this is jumping ahead a couple weeks, but there are 3 receivers, and this is not how I normally do my rookie drafts. There are 3 receivers that I think are tier 1 ahead of any of these running backs.
Foreshadowing.
Stick around. That's a pro tease.
There you go. There you go. We've been doing this a little while. We've been doing this. Also, Kyle, if you are listening, I apologize for bringing up Superflex. Please know that I love you, and it was meant in admiration, not disrespect. Now, moving forward, let's continue to work our way down the DLF rankings here at running back number 2 on their 2021 rookie rankings here. One of my favorites from a year ago, and I was heartbroken when he went back to school as a senior, but here we are. Travis Etienne, listed as an 5'10", 200-pound running back out of Clemson. You talk about a guy who we've been able to watch mature over the years. You talk about a player who decided to go back and shocked a lot of folks, because we saw him in somewhat of the same league as the guys who went near the top last year. And maybe he saw the competition and was like, hey, there's a lot of guys up here. And maybe, hey, I want to go back and see if I can win this national championship. Or, hey, maybe I've got more to prove because I haven't done enough in the passing game. I don't know what the motivation was for Travis Etienne, but we did see him come back and he showed out and he continued to do fantastic things on the field. The carry count was less this season, only getting 168 carries, 914 yards. He still averaged nice 5 yards a carry. But my goodness, you talk about a guy who really turned that receiving profile way up. 48 receptions, 588 yards for 2 touchdowns. And the guy continued to be an absolute monster in that Clemson offense. So as we look at Travis Etienne, Zach, talk to me about where you land and how you're feeling regarding his prospects moving forward.
So I don't think there's a better home run hitter in the 21 class than Etienne. And certainly nobody has done it on a bigger stage. Clemson has a perennial date with the college football playoffs, and that keeps Etienne at the forefront of everybody's fantasy football consciousness. Like that, it's just he's there. He's always on your mind. Etienne accelerates instantaneously. Like he's that 0 to 60 in like 2.4 second. You know, he's a high performance automobile. And if a defender takes a bad angle, then he is chasing Etienne to the end zone. Like it's just nothing you can do. And like he can run inside adequately. Like he's okay, but he's absolutely deadly off the edge and in space. I think part of that is because he's really a straight line guy. And when you get inside, you start having a little bit more traffic to maneuver around. The big thing, I think, though, with Etienne and the difference. So last year, I think he was my running back 7 when I first did my rankings. Obviously, he went back. This year, he's my 4. I've come around a little bit on Etienne, and I don't love everything about his game, but the obvious improvements in the receiving game just add another weapon to get him in space, which is where he needs to be successful. Oh, your mic's gone.
Yeah. Sorry about that. The beauty of ETN is the fact that, and I don't know how many people you can say this for on a year-to-year basis. If you simply get him the ball, good things happen, right? And when I say that, we talk about elite traits, and we want to be excited about these players that we're getting because they're coming into the league, they're having all this opportunity, and we want them to be able to stand out and shine if we're going to be spending these high rookie picks on them. Travis Etienne is the type of guy who makes your day on any given touch. When there's space and his acceleration, his 0 to 60 is as absurd as I've seen from anyone. He has just an absolutely absurd 6th gear that people just don't get to. It's really gross to be able to see at times. Just like, okay, he's gone. That's it. And the other part of that, though, that scares me because I am as much of a Travis Etienne fan as someone who might be a Clemson fan. I am all aboard Travis Etienne. What scares me, though, is that schematically, if he gets placed, and I don't think this would necessarily be the case, I'd like to hope not, but if he gets placed somewhere where it's like pure power running scheme, and he's not able to really take advantage of space, not really able to take advantage, because like you said, with his speed, one of his deficiencies is the fact that, hey, while his lateral agility isn't great, his ability to get north is awesome. And when he's decisive, when he plants and goes, great things happen because he is sliding through holes that you didn't even see on that angle of film. You didn't know that someone could be able to do it. And I'm excited about him, and I'm terrified at the same time because I'm just really curious how the league is going to see him. So you've got, and I know you don't do comps. Comps aren't necessarily one of your favorite things, right? But I want you to talk through this because this will help explain a lot of the trepidation that you have behind Travis Etienne. So let's talk about what you what you're not so thrilled about his game.
So yeah, and you know it's really funny is I've got kind of a quasi comp. It didn't make it into the write up because I hate comps, and I don't necessarily want people going back for posterity and reading exactly this. But I said to Riley Bymaster in a DM because we were going back and forth, and he doesn't really like ETN either. But I said ETN is like Rojo and Kerryon Johnson had a baby. I said, but the problem is it's a C-section because he's not always going in the right spot. He doesn't always, hit that hole that is supposed to be there for him. And so that's I just can't get that out of my mind. The other things though, the issues I have with ETN is that there's still room for him to grow as a pass catcher. Like he made great strides, but I still think in that second and a half between the ball leaving the quarterback's hand and when it gets the ETN, it is just sheer terror for him. Like it does. It feels like I'm watching The Stand. Like it's just man, Stephen King, and he's prone to concentration drops because of this. He starts scanning his peripherals for linebackers. Like you can see him just be like, I don't want to get hit and I don't want to drop this ball. And because he's so worried about those two things, he's not catching the ball. He's not ever going to be mistaken for a player like Derrick Henry. He does go down on first contact a lot, especially if he's hit low. And this was something that I noted in Ronald Jones' profile. Like it's so similar. The write-up I had for Ronald Jones and the write-up I have for Travis Etienne, it's uncanny how similar they are, except Etienne has that ability to catch passes that gets him out in space, which is where he needs to be, that Ronald Jones really never had. And so that's the one thing I think that elevates him above that profile. So that's where I'm at. I think, look, there's a lot to like about ETN. Ultimately, his value is going to be whether or not his NFL team utilizes his burgeoning talent as a receiver. He's a straight line runner, and ideally he ends up in a place that he can be a pass catcher plus where he sees efficient touches.
And yeah, and that hurts to say. And I am again surprised Rojo fan here. And when you said that to me last year about their games, it was like, like it's really interesting because I was a fan of what Rojo did in terms of the prospect that he is. And hey, here we are a few years later, Rojo getting out some opportunity, looking pretty good, looking very competent. And with ETN, the only thing that I'll push back on in terms of I did see him, while he doesn't have great lateral agility, we do see just good agility in terms of good contact balance. Yes, sometimes first tackler can get him, but I've also seen him run through his fair share of arm tackles, and I've also seen him obviously when he's up to speed, people try to tackle him, and it's an absolute problem for people. So
it's especially when there's traffic at his feet, though. That's the one thing that I like. And it was the same with Ronald Jones. It was traffic at his feet and down, no traffic or guys hitting him up top, and there he was, gone, like just home run.
I like the run. I like his run strength. I think that he will be a really interesting case, and I'm excited to see where he eventually lands and what becomes of his prospects. Because here we're looking at a couple of senior running backs coming out that everyone right now is excited about, and we'll see what the NFL has to say in reference to, hey, are these first round guys? Are they into first round guys? Are they early day two? What becomes of the draft profiles or the draft prospects of these two? So with that said, let's go ahead and go to number 3 on DLF's list here. And that brings us to North Kakalaki, UNC's own Javonte Williams. Again, you talk about someone who's an absolute load. Absolute brick house. And it's funny because when you look at When you look at everything on face value, you're like, hey, where does this guy come from? Like, what the heck happened? And his running mate, Michael Carter, was the one who got a ton of the pub the previous season. And then this year, it's funny because Williams gives you a similar carry count, but he does a lot more with them this year, scoring 19 touchdowns on the ground, which he was the hammer. And yes, in this junior season, he did reach the Zach Reed rule. He got to 25 catches. So, Zach, we're looking at Javonte Williams currently number 3 on DLS list. Talk to us about your thoughts on his game.
It's amazing to me watching Javonte Williams that he only garnered interest from 2 programs coming out of high school. It was North Carolina and Appalachian State, and that was it. Like, those are the only 2 programs that were interested in him. And here he is. He comes out in 2021. He runs for over 100 yards, 6 different games, and he averaged 103 per game while sharing that backfield. And it just like that sort of thing blows my mind. Before I get into the rest of Javonte Williams, I need to stop. I need to credit Robert Gillespie, and I know that you've seen me talk about him a couple times. This man needs to be in the NFL as a running back coach. Carolina, between Carter and Williams, and in previous seasons, Antonio Williams, those 3 guys, I don't think I saw them miss more than 3 blitz pickups in all of the games that I watched them. Man, Robert Gillespie coaching the running backs at UNC is an absolute monster, and somebody needs to get him in the NFL, give him a chance to prove himself there and potentially be a head coach or move up the chain, because, man, I haven't been as impressed with a backfield in a long time. Back to Javonte Williams. He's incredibly versatile, and you're not going to hear me say that word on very many players this year, but Williams's skill set is pretty much perfect. He runs between the tackles with vision and ferocity. He keeps his pad level low to shed tacklers. And although Williams doesn't seek out contact, like he's not the John Kelly, like John Kelly used to go 3 yards out of his way to lay somebody out. And I loved that at the time. Looking back, that may not be the approach that wins the NFL. Williams doesn't seek out that contact, but he does have power enough to run through it, and he keeps his legs churning to pick up those extra yards on nearly every play. And look, I'm an engineer. I've been trying to figure out how to describe Williams's acceleration without using a free body diagram. And I just can't. Like, he's got this quick burst, and then he seems to gain speed for the entire duration of his run. And although he's a bigger back, Williams has the speed to pick up those chunk runs outside the tackles, as well as the power to run inside. And he was a staple in the passing game at UNC, not just being a receiver, but also being brought in on 3rd down and picking up blitzes. So he's got that already built-in skill set of being a blitz pickup where you don't have to take him out on 3rd down.
Yeah, and I love what you said in terms of just how he operates in specifically within the tackle box. But the way, and I don't know what his top end speed is eventually going to be, but when you see him, like you're saying, just his ability to almost like a track athlete, right? So track athlete hits the corner and like this acceleration is kind of crazy. And you see these things, it's like, wait, he's defeating angles. And I don't know that he should have been defeating angles that way. Like, it's really weird. Vision, ability to break tackles, his power. And one of the real delights about him is his hands.
Yeah.
You've got a soft pair of mitts on Javonte Williams. And while he's not some dynamic route runner out of the backfield that's someone that you're just going to, break down linebackers and whatnot, his ability as an outlet, again, the ability to stay on the field on 3rd downs, You highlighted the pass protection, and I remember in the first game that I saw against Boston College, one of the first things he has this poor pass pro set where the blitzer like obliterates him on the edge. He hits Sam Howell and he ends up throwing an interception because of it on their own goal line. And I was like, yikes! But like you said, we've been moving throughout, like solid in that area. Very good vision. His ability to maneuver and avoid congestion between the tackles. Man, he offers so much that's a major plus. I have questions, Zach. I have questions. Okay. First off, just from a pure questions perspective, he absolutely terrorized ACC defenses as Travis Etienne has as well. And admittedly, so I feel like a lot of people have drugged the ACC and their ability to play defense quite a bit over the last few years, and obviously 12 gets this same rap. And when you look at, like you said, when you look at Javonte Williams' game log, he's performing week in, week out. The only problem is when you put him in situation like when the lights are the brightest. We saw him fail one test miserably. We had 11 for 28 against Notre Dame. And then we saw him show out like nobody's business against Miami. And I remember watching that game live, and just the show that he and Carter put on was crazy. Are we, even with ETN, can learn to come specifically with Williams? One of my questions: are we confident that what he does and what he showed us against these ACC defenses, are we confident that it's something that transitions to the next level?
So here's the way I kind of work around that, and it's the same way I kind of work with some of the lower conference players. Is if I see you do it, and the way I scout, I have a plus minus chart, and so I'll sit there and I will write down what I see happen, whether it was positive or negative. If you do it again, you get another positive or negative. And so I can see the number of times a player repeats certain things, positive or negative, because to me, that's who the player is. And then what I'll do is, once we get to, obviously we're not having the combine this year, but once we get to pro days and once we see numbers, once we see his athleticism, if his athleticism tracks with what I've seen, you can only play against who's out there in front of you. If his athleticism is not what I expect it to be, then we have an issue where what I'm seeing may not be exactly what happens. And so then you've got to go back and look at the player again and kind of rethink rankings. Right now, he and Najee Harris go back and forth as my running back one, like almost weekly. Like they're right there neck and neck. I've got them basically even, and the skill set that they have is so similar that choosing between the two for me is really tough. I think the things that I see with Javonte Williams that give me pause are occasionally he has these lapses in patience where, and they're really apparent because when they happen, he runs into the back of his defender. I mean, into the back of his blockers instead of waiting for the hole to open up. And so by doing that, he creates kind of a bottleneck and also puts the defenders in his way instead of just having that little bit of patience. And the other issue that I saw, and this happened early in his career, where Antonio Williams would come in and take goal line carries. Now, that obviously didn't happen in 2021 because Javonte Williams had 19 touchdowns and he was the goal line back, and Michael Carter was more of the pass catcher. But that's something to keep in the back of your mind headed into the NFL, where because he ceded that goal line work to Antonio Williams, who is a lesser back, that gives me a little bit of question, maybe just in the back of my mind, headed into the next level.
Yeah, we see that with these first three guys, everybody's got at least one elite trait, and you talk about someone who can vulture anything on the touchdown if you give him such a minimal role as, hey, just be the goal line guy. But also there's so much more to be unearthed in this game, and he doesn't have this like crazy lateral agility similar to, this isn't a comp, people, so everybody relax. Just in terms of what I see, remember, I do this as a hobby. I am not a professional. I am simply relaying the things that I see. And when I look back last year, even with someone like Jonathan Taylor didn't have this crazy lateral agility where he's just like, oh, brain crossover, oh, frozen. Like it wasn't that, but he has these nice, sharp, subtle cuts that put him in position to be able to move forward. And it's not this dancing. He's very deliberate in his movements as well. And I like Javonte Williams a lot. He is not currently my number 2 running back, though. He is currently my 3, but I like him a lot. I think that at this point we've reached the 3 guys that I think in this class that could be, and we talked about this a lot last year, but be the A side of the committee, right? So we're looking at a committee approach. If I have to build my game plan, and maybe there's one more guy because we haven't gotten there yet, but we will very soon. When we look at, if you talk about building an offense around a player, like, could I build my offense? Could I build my house, build my everything, how we want to dictate an offense around what you do? And I think that these 3 guys are, and maybe one more, maybe, are those types of guys. And I like this group. But one of the other things that I wrote down real quick, and I don't want to linger here because I get to rambling sometimes. Javonte Williams, I I hope that he's not pigeonholed in the vein of like a Zach Moss, because from a plus side, in terms of what Zach Moss did well as a prospect, we see the power, we see the ability to show soft hands in moments, we see his ability to even in moments to be not necessarily elusive, but to break tackles, to even have these subtle cuts. I hope that he's not relegated to like Zach Moss plus, because I think that would be a gross misutilization of, it's not even a word, I don't think, misutilization, a gross misuse of his ability. So I'll leave it there with Javonte. I don't want to belabor the point. Moving on, again, number 4 here for folks over at DLF. We didn't see this guy in 2020. We missed him. And at this point, hailing from RBU, Memphis, where apparently all of the running backs come to roost. Kenneth Gainwell, listed at 5'11", 183. And you talk about, again, a player who had to wait his turn to some degree, but also even in the midst of Antonio Gibson getting his part-time work, Kenneth Gainwell was one of the reasons why Antonio Gibson was not used maybe as optimally as he could have been at the college level. So we look at Kenneth Gainwell. We didn't see him this season, and one of the sad things around someone who lost several family members to COVID, that's some other stuff that probably for another pod for another day. But Zach, before I continue to ramble, Kenneth Gainwell, take us through his game and what you like and what stands out to you.
Yeah, I think Gainwell made the most of his sophomore year, because that's the last time we saw him. We saw him as a sophomore, where he piled up over 2,000 all-purpose yards. So, he had 51 receptions for 610 yards, and he had another 230 carries for over 1,400 yards. And look, he's undersized. You mentioned I have him a little bit heavier than you said, 180 something. I have him at 191, but we're splitting hairs there. I mean, he really needs to be another 15 pounds heavier to get really excited. But although he's undersized, he breaks or eludes a ton of tackles. He does this great thing where he kind of contorts his body to create glancing blows, which allows him to continue on. So he's got that contact balance, but it's really his upper body. He turns it just such a way to get that angle. And this combined with Gainwell's compact running style allows him to be effective carrying the ball inside, which is not something you're thinking about with a guy who is, 5'11", 190 pounds. Like, he's a tiny, tiny guy, but he can carry the ball inside. His true talent, though, is outside the hash marks. Gainwell has enough speed to get the edge, and once he is there, he uses, and we're going to talk about pace again, but pace and acceleration, because he accelerates faster than just about anybody else that's on the field with him. He'll use his slow down. It's almost like a hesitation dribble where he'll slow down and then he'll hit the gas. And man, he can get by defenders and reel off chunk plays that way. And for my money, Gainwell is the best receiving back in this class, bar none. You could probably put him in the slot in the NFL and let him go, and he would be just fine. Gainwell's skills as a receiver are so advanced that he's even comfortable making adjustments on back shoulder throws 25, 30 yards down the field. And I saw that 4 or 5 different times in different games that I watched. So this is not just like a one-time thing where he went down the field and made a play. He can consistently go down and make a back shoulder adjustment, which is pretty impressive for a running back.
Zach, tell me, I need to know that I'm not being hoodwinked, that I'm not being tricked, that I'm not going to be spending whatever pick that I have on a Tariq Cohen plus. I need to know that he's not Duke Johnson plus. I need him to fulfill the great hope, right? The great hope of the slight, super special runner of a football, but also absolutely outstanding receiver-like skill set. And I am very much a fan of Kenny Gainwell. And this is, by the way, spoiler alert, this is the last guy that I feel that if you want to try to build your offense around what they do, you will find a lot of success and you will find a lot of fantasy goodness. You talk about the pacing. The pacing is special. His ability to change speeds really makes a lot of people look stupid. And just like you said, and this is key, if you're going to be slight of frame, don't get hit squarely, right? you can't be someone that I'm excited to see get 200 some odd carries like he did at Memphis and do that in the league and be getting hit square left and right. His ability to make himself smaller, his ability to even duck under tackles, his ability with contact balance after he's hit, these are all fantastic traits that I'm excited about. But the trepidation, and this is my glaring question with Kenneth Gainwell, there are a lot of places where I think that he'll find success. No question. His ability to be split out wide and do a bunch of fun things. Like if you put him with a truly creative play caller, the sky's the limit. I don't want to be tricked into the hope that his forefathers, his fantasy forefathers, have put him in. Do you have those questions, or what questions do you have regarding Gainwell's game?
Yeah, look, Gainwell, size is the root of most of his problems. In fact, if he was 20 pounds heavier, he would be unquestionably my running back one. I wouldn't even bat an eye. If he was 20 pounds heavier, he would be the running back one in this class. Not even close. I hate that. Not even close. That's so cliche, but it's true. Like he would be the running back one. The problem is he struggles in blitz pickup mightily. Like he's terrible at it. He often resorts to just kind of ineffectually diving at guys' feet. Like that's his idea of picking up a blitz. Gainwell also tends to give up ground when he's met in the backfield. So, and I think what he's trying to do is creating this huge positive play, spinning out of a tackle and giving up ground and thinking he can reverse his field. But what usually ends up happening is he loses yardage and gets tackled in the backfield. And I also don't like Gainwell's play near the goal line. He even lost the ball several times, carrying it with one hand and kind of getting careless at the top of the pile or trying to go around the edge. And so there are all of these things that really stem from Gainwell being undersized that are questions. So to me, it comes down to 15 or 20 pounds and draft capital. If Gainwell can add some weight, and he's been theoretically training for this year, although, like you said, it was not I said this was the most difficult open I've ever had to write in 5 years of doing film evaluations, not because there's a lack of things to say about Gainwell, but because Gainwell opted out because he had 4 members of his family die from COVID. And so he didn't do it to get better. He didn't do it to, maintain his draft capital. He didn't do it to avoid injury. So it's really nebulous as to what Kenny Gainwell we're going to see when we see him again. But if he's selected in the first 3 rounds, if he's added some weight, then he's going to be a tremendous addition to your fantasy squad. If not, it doesn't matter because he's not going to be a first-round pick. He'll be a second, maybe an early third rookie pick. And if he is, that's worth a dart throw because he has that pass catcher plus profile where in a pinch, a team could use him as an every down running back. And at the very least, you've got a Tariq Cohen.
Yep. Yeah. I think the ceiling is really high, and it almost feels like not that the floor is low, but the floor is like you were saying. Hey, you've got a Tariq Cohen who might fool around and give you an RB1 season because he catches 85 balls and does some fun things there. Kenny Gainwell, and that's exciting. It's exciting to see what could, but we've seen this, and hopefully he builds on what the hope that we have for others. We've got a couple more guys, and Zach, obviously, if you want to cut it off after this 5th, we can. If you want to continue into number 2,
back. If you got time, I got time.
Let's get it. Awesome. At number 5 in the DLF rankings here, they had one Trey Sermon, running back out of Oklahoma. Trey Sermon, we saw him originally at Oklahoma doing good things there, part of teams that win a lot of games, get to the college playoff, and inevitably get smoked on many of occasions. But Trey Sermon then transfers to Ohio State and becomes someone who's not incredibly special out the gate, but you talk about someone who closed the year on fire. Trey Sermon did that his senior year. We're looking at 116 carries, 870 yards, 7.5 yards per touch, which is kind of wild to think about. However, the first guy on the list so far to not meet the Zach Reed rule, does not have one season with over 20 receptions. But again, you talk about someone who racked up 300 some odd yards against Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game and gave Clemson 1,000,000,001 fits in the college football semifinal playoffs. Trey Sermon, talk to us, Zach. What do you like? What are you seeing? What do you feel in regards to Trey Sermon?
So the way I see it, there are only two reasons that you move to Columbus, Ohio. You're either starting up a chain restaurant. The city is home to the original Wendy's, the original Bob Evans, Charlie's Grilled Subs, and kind of oddly Buffalo Wild Wings. Like that tracks, doesn't it? Or the other reason is you're hopping in line behind Carlos Hyde, Ezekiel Elliott, J.K. Dobbins on your way to the NFL. And obviously Trey Sermon transferred to Ohio State because he's hungry for the latter of those options. So Sermon is a big back. He's over 6 feet tall. He's 215 pounds, but he's at his best on stretch runs where he can get to the edge. Like, he's got speed and he picks it up very quickly. He uses a little like slide cut to change directions so he doesn't lose momentum when he's making cuts. Sermon's pretty difficult to tackle when he's hit above the waist. He's really strong upper body, and he'll shrug defenders off. He'll stiff arm them off. And while he's functional as a receiver, I don't think that he's ever going to be somebody that a team relies on. And so that, to me, like, he's not in my top 5 because of how much I weight pass catching and because how much fantasy football weights pass catching. That's the other thing. Like, if I was going to evaluate as an NFL team, Trey Sermon as a runner, I think he is probably worthy of a top 5 in this class. As an overall player and as a fantasy asset, which is, again, that's how I am evaluating players, from a fantasy football lens. I'm not in any front offices. Not even Houston will take me, and they'll take just about anybody. But that's where I see him. I think that he's not a pass catcher. He's really fast. He's great on the edge. He's all right in the middle, but
that's one of the marked differences, I feel like, from Trey Sermon from the group that we've talked through to this point. Trey Sermon does not have, in my estimation, an elite trait.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see anything about his game where I'm just like, yes, like, ooh, suicide, crazy. Look at this ability that he has. He can run with good power. He can run with good contact balance. He can be someone that you check it down to, and maybe he makes a guy miss. And one of the things that I do commend Trey Sermon on is that the player that he was at Oklahoma, and maybe it's scheme, maybe it's he's grown as a player, it could be several things, but the player that he was at Ohio State, specifically on how he closed his season in such grand fashion, where you could legitimately lean on him in all facets. He's breaking tackles. He's seeing the field well. And at Oklahoma, I don't know that I ever saw him really shine, specifically from a vision perspective and being able to make the most, because he's someone who gets what's blocked. And what we saw at Ohio State is, not only am I going to get you what's blocked, but I can make people pay at the second level and give you a little bit more. And it was a real treat to see him become that, because it gives you a leg to stand on to say, okay, we're not dealing with a jag, right? We're not, as people like to say, and I don't even necessarily love the term, but we're not dealing with someone who is quote unquote average for the NFL, right? We're dealing with a guy who can give you a little bit more, who can squeeze a little bit more juice out of it. And I don't know. Do you feel like that's accurate in terms of how I'm describing him? Because I had a hard time putting my finger on him moving forward.
I do. I didn't compare him to a jag. What I said was Sermon runs like he's trying to park an Aston Martin. So he slows down and he waits for that double wide space to open up. Like, he doesn't want to scratch any paint. He's not letting anybody get within a door's length of him. And this works behind the Buckeye offensive line because they're good. But at the next level, I think that's going to be an issue for Sermon. And so that's one of the red flags that I see with his profile. And also, I think Sermon recoils from contact an awful lot, which again, you don't want to be hunting it out, but you're going to get hit sometimes. And a lot of time I see him really give up ground instead of running through a defender. And so that sort of thing is, I'm a little bit hesitant on drafting Sermon on my fantasy team. I think it's really likely that Trey Sermon ends up the victim to the current oversaturation of running backs that's in the NFL. I mean, there's so many good running backs in the NFL. We keep getting 4 or 5 or 6 every year that come in that are good. And especially since his receiving skills are passable at best, I think that he's going to struggle to carve out a role. He'll really need to land on a thin depth chart and catch a few breaks for Sermon to be, producing for your fantasy team, I think.
Is Trey Sermon someone you could ever envision giving you an RB1 season, like in the vein of, I come in because James Conner goes down, I come in because CMC goes down? Is he someone like, I want to envision a ceiling for Sermon, and I think he gave us a bit of a taste of it toward his latter days in at Ohio State. I just don't know where to put, how did
I don't think he can give you a running back 1 season. I think he could give you that, mid to high end running back 2 season. And don't take this season as the gold standard for running back 1 seasons, because this was not a typical season. You had Barkley hurt, you had McCaffrey hurt, this was running back 1 was not a great shake to produce this season. Typically, the top 5 backs are going to be in an echelon by themselves, and then there are going to be another 6 or 8 guys in that next group, and then you're going to have the group that if everything broke right, Trey Sermon would be in. But I don't see him catching more than 30 balls in a season. So I think that pretty much precludes him from being a running back 1. Unless he was in a situation like Leonard Fournette a couple years ago, where everybody was hurt and Fournette was the only back in the backfield and he got 100 targets. I don't see Trey Sermon being quite that type. I think he's going to be kind of lost in this. The nice thing about it for us and for our listeners is somebody in your league is going to be really excited about Trey Sermon, because he rolled off some games in very high profile situations. So you've got this kind of island game phenomenon that you see in the NFL, where like a player will go off and everybody is excited. That same thing happened with Trey Sermon, and he had some very good games on national TV. And so people are going to be excited. Well, DLF has got him at 5 right now. He's not a top 5 running back. DLF is much smarter than we are. They just haven't caught up yet. And hopefully your league won't either.
Yeah, and again, when it comes to Trey Sermon, he didn't get a ton of work earlier in the year. He gives you 11 carries, 13 carries, 12 carries, 9 carries. And then it gets in this game against Michigan State where he goes for 112 on 10 carries. And then he goes in back-to-back games with Northwestern and Clemson, where he is he carries the ball 60 times for over 500 yards, which is just kind of like, it's absurd, right? He's just getting his way. And so he comes in at the Senior Bowl as well. We got news on that, and I was trying to find it as you were talking as well. He did measure in at 6 feet 213, when I think previously they had measured him at not measured him, but he was listed at like 6'1", 215.
Yep.
So slightly smaller, but still a good size back. And I'm curious to see, again, like you're saying, if he gets day 2 capital. I find that really interesting. And if he doesn't, we'll see what happens. But here we are. We're coming into the end of the evening. We've got one guy left that we'd like to discuss, and someone who has fallen from grace to some degree. That someone who was an All-American in the 2019 season because they led the world in rushing. There was no one doing what this guy was doing in 2019. That is Oklahoma State standout Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard is number 6 on DLF's rankings here as we move forward. The listing here that they have him at 6'1", 207. And again, from what he was last season, certified bell cow, certified big play, certified any and every accolade that you want to lay upon him. Number 1 in the NCAA in rushing yards in 2019, number 1 in rush attempts, number 1 in plays from scrimmage, number 1 from yards from scrimmage, number 1 in touchdowns in the Big 12. I mean, responsible for 21 touchdowns. He rushes for over 2,000 yards, passes the Zach Reed rule in his freshman and sophomore season. Chuba was, as the friend Ray GQ says, Chuba was the hottest thing smoking. One of Ray's things, hottest thing smoking, and I love it. And I try to use it anytime I can. But Chuba was definitely that. And then we come into this COVID shortened season, and the sizzle, as you say, Zach, the sizzle wasn't there. The sizzle didn't quite get us where we wanted to be. He only gave us 625 yards rushing, and he only gave us 8 receptions in 7 games, which that does not excite you in the least bit in terms of what it was. And I know that he battled some injuries. I know that he had a weird weird start to the season with disagreement with his coach, and kind of nothing really quite broke in Chuba's direction. If everything was coming up roses in 19, everything came up snake eyes in 2020 for Chuba. So talk to us about Chuba, what your thoughts on his game are and his prospects.
That's funny. Have you seen the movie The Blues Brothers? I don't know. I'm dating myself. It's an older movie, but
it's been a very long time. But no, I have not seen that one in a very long time.
So Jake and Elwood's final ride in the Bluesmobile, where they park the car, get out, and everything just kind of falls off the car. I don't think anything has fallen apart so spectacularly since then as Chuba Hubbard's junior season at Oklahoma this year. Look, his rushing efficiency, his per carry average, his receiving share, 4 tires in the front bumper, all dropped down onto the pavement. But I do think that is going to drop the cost to acquire Chuba Hubbard, which, like you said before, he was a 2,000-yard rusher last year. So Chuba succeeds outside the hash marks where he can utilize his speed, and he is fast. He gets up to speed quickly and can cut at full speed. He kind of like slide steps. It's that little kind of subtle and change direction. Hubbard is one of the best pass catching backs in this class, and he nearly always gathers the ball away from his frame. We talk about that a lot with receivers, where we talk about hands catching and catching the ball away from your body. And the reason that's important, and especially important for a running back, is because if you let the ball travel in on you, A, you're more likely to drop it, but B, it can be knocked loose, and all of a sudden you're creating opportunities for turnovers, not just incompletions, but popping the ball up in the air and picks. Chuba avoids that pretty well. He's a hands catcher. And once he has the ball in space, Hubbard's speed and elusiveness are on full display. He's not great running between the tackles, but he does get to the hole quickly when he identifies it. And so I like that part of his game as well.
With Chuba Hubbard, even in a season where, like we just said, Murphy's Law, anything that could go wrong went wrong. I really enjoyed the flashes that I saw from him in 2020, particularly with vision. In 2019, I remember watching so much of his film, and obviously he's talented enough and fast enough to be able to do some spectacular things if you give him space. And I feel like that offense, the way that they were cooking things up and the offensive line were giving him just lanes galore to be able to explore. Dixie Chicks was basically playing as the soundtrack for his 2019 season. Wide open spaces, right? Wide open room to make your big mistake. Like, just it was crazy. And so in 2020, and one of the things before I leave 2019, one of the things I remember seeing was anytime there was penetration, anytime there was congestion, he was it seemed like he was so confused. It seemed like any hiccup to the natural play progression just kind of left him in this position where he wasn't sure what was going on, didn't have a lot of creativity as a runner, like not a lot of spontaneity in those moments when things were disrupted. In 2020, in the very limited film that we got, I feel like he figured some of those things out. And even though he wasn't breaking off all of these 50, 60, 70-yard runs left and right all the time, I still feel that he proved to some degree that between the tackles, he could be functional. And even when there is the immediate penetration that may happen and the trash at his feet, he wasn't clueless. And I was so thankful that he came back in 2020 to at least show me that, because I was so down. I was guy has the emptiest 2,000-yard season, because one of the things that people would hate on Darrell Henderson about, he's got all these wide open holes that he's running through. Like, what do you expect? But we were celebrating as a community. We were celebrating Chuba for doing a lot of the same things with a greater amount of speed. So track speed, track star, love it, and he's fantastic. But in terms of his game, what are some things that give you any kind of pause regarding Chuba?
So it feels like Hubbard plays small, which again, he's 6'1", 207, I think we got him listed at. So he's almost 210 pounds, but he's very easy to bring down before he's gotten up to speed. Like, he's great once he's going, but pre-acceleration, man, you can knock him over. I bet I could well, maybe not me, but a normal person, a football player can take him down pretty easily. And the other thing, and maybe this is part of that, but Hubbard seems to be trying to score untouched. Like, he's trying to make this amazing run where no one lays a finger on him. And I think that contributes a lot to him hesitating behind the line of scrimmage. And you mentioned that earlier in his career. I saw some of this in 2020 as well. And I think even his short yardage, Hubbard's processing depends on having those huge swaths of daylight. And that's something that just a little bit of hesitation. Like, he's dropped probably further than he should, but him dropping is warranted, and he also was higher than he should have been before the drop. So I think it kind of, I don't know, ends up being a wash. Hubbard, I think, is one of the few players in the 2021 class who has proven himself capable of being a three-down bell cow. He probably won't start out with control of a backfield, but because he's got that pass catching, because he's had the kind of history of being a bell cow, it should make him interesting in PPR leagues. And his pass catcher plus profile means that he's never more than a breakaway from a big production. And it kind of reminds me of Myles Gaskin, that profile where you had, oh yeah, he's going to be great, and then we don't know. You had that last year where it was kind of a strange, and then you had an opportunity in Miami where he was fantastic this past year when he was on the field. Chuba Hubbard feels a lot like that, not necessarily the same type of player, but could end up in that same type of situation.
in the hope would be, and I saw some things on film sometimes, like just some drops, some fumbles, where just like
Yep.
it almost felt like he just I don't even know how to articulate that as I want to. Not that he did not care. It was almost like he would get in his head sometimes, and the whole mood of how he functions
It,
would take a hit when he wasn't breaking off those. Almost like a momentum in a basketball game, right? So, like once he went cold, it's almost like he wouldn't shoot himself out of it.
well, it's easy to avalanche. It's easy to, something goes wrong, and if you don't have we always talk about, having mental fortitude, or having that strength mentally, and that's what people are talking about. It's the almost having a short memory. It's when things go wrong, you have to forget them, and when things go right, you have to hold on to them for as long as you can and build on them. And I think you're exactly right. I think that sometimes Hubbard would let that negative pile up and pile up and pile up, and all of a sudden you have 2 or 3 or 4 plays in a row where it's like, oh man, what are you doing?
And at this point, I'm really interested to see what the NFL thinks of Chuba. Again, we're a year removed from him leading the nation in rushing, and just breaking off these runs where you're just like, see ya. Like, you can try if you want to, but it doesn't matter. And to your point, and I'll leave it with this. To your point with him playing smaller than his size, you'd see him drop his shoulders and try to like finish runs. Like you'd see him attempt to do those things. And I'm curious if last season, with his issues with not seeing things very well, and I feel like he got hit more squarely than he probably should have. I'm curious with what I saw with him cleaning up his vision to some degree, and having a little bit more setting up of blocks. I'm hopeful that there's still meat on the bone from a potential standpoint to see what he can be. But I don't have him. I don't think I'm as excited about him as many may be. But with that said, we have reached the end of our list for this evening. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. We've got a lot of good stuff. We've entered the mind of Zach Reed, and I feel like the people have to know, at least with the 6 that we have this evening, you can tell us kind of how you order them, or even how you have them on the greater list of backs, if you will. But how do you have these 6 guys shaking out, whether it be your tiers? And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but just to put a nice bow on it to close our evening, how do you have them lined up?
So I've got a clear top tier of running backs with Javonte Williams and Najee Harris as 1 and 2. Pick your poison, pick your order. If you don't love older running backs, go with Williams. If you love the flavor of the year and the ability to hurdle small buildings in a single bound, then go with Najee Harris. Then my next player on this list would be Kenny Gainwell. And again, that's strictly based on what I've seen on the field and grading him as a player and a fantasy football player. But that's contingent on draft capital. It's contingent on, his weight. There are a lot of things at play, but right now he is my third. ETN would be next on that list. And then Chuba, and then Trey Sermon, with no pass catching anywhere in sight, is squarely at the back of that list. Mute again.
J mute check coming back. Here. The order that I have is slightly different. I think our top and bottom are the same. And referring to these 6 guys, I've got Najee up top, and I don't think that there's anyone, unless something's crazy that I find on film, that there's no one that's coming for the throne. I think Najee's my one with a bullet in this group. I've got ETN. I'm still incredibly excited, and again, I think maybe this is I don't know if this is a hole in my game, or just maybe this is just aesthetically pleasing. But I like to see again a guy with elite traits, guys that can show just really special things when they get the ball in their hands. And I think Najee is that type. So I've got Najee at number 2 currently. I've got Javonte Williams at number 3. And again, elite trait, just destroying people. Just his power running is something to behold. It's awesome. At number 4, I've got Kenny Gainwell. And I think that I waffle back and forth on whether or not he can be the A side of a committee. I don't know, but his ability to catch the ball is something that will keep him in play and keep people excited about him, I think, to get an opportunity at some point. Again, I think back, and he's not as small as Tariq Cohen or Duke, but he's 5'11". So I'm just curious if there's a hole in me that says, he's not, he kind of falls in those same line or that same mindset of player, or if I'm missing it. But his ability to run the ball with ball in the hand, he's still fantastic. Kenny Gainwell's good. So I've got him currently at number 4. And then it drops way down tier wise, or from grade wise for me, to Chuba. And Trey Sermon is behind Chuba. And again, all of those guys have at least some elite trait, except for Trey Sermon. So yeah, I'm excited to be able to continue moving forward. But that's the list as of now, subject to change. Obviously, if you're curious about the notes that Zach has regarding his players, he has been open and willing to share those and to put those out for public consumption. So if you're curious, you want to know what we see, you want to know our perspectives, we're not hard to reach. You can find us on Twitter. He's at Tacit Assassin 13. I'm on Twitter at JMikeCheck, at JMIC Check. Zach, what do you have to close for us this evening as we finish up our do-si-do, our rookie do-si-do for the year?
I mean, you pretty much hit it. You want to know something wild, though? We talked about Kenny Gainwell as being a pretty good runner. We talk about Kenny Gainwell as being a fantastic receiver. He was a quarterback in high school.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
Wild. I mean, just an athlete. In terms of wrap-up, look, we're the DFPN at work, the only at work in town. If you want to get a hold of the show, we are Dynasty Dummies at gmail.com. Long form, we're at Dynasty Dummies. Like J Mike said, I am at Tacit Assassin 13. He is at J Mike Check. And this has been the initial rookie scouting square dance. Thanks for listening. Peace. The rookie scouting square dance.
That's strong.